Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here in just a few minutes. As we wait for any folks that might be hopping on the call, we're going to go ahead and have a polling question of what issues are employees confronting now, what issues are your employees confronting now as a result of teleworking? And you can check all that apply. And we'll go ahead and, if you can go ahead and fill this out while we give it a couple more minutes for folks to hop on. All right, if we can go ahead and pull up the responses. So it looks like the majority are having some issues with childcare and homeschooling, which makes sense. And then just kind of a little bit of everything, which is what we're seeing throughout the region. So that's a great feedback. So my name is Dan Murphy. I'm the program manager for Georgia Community Options. Georgia Community Options is a program funded by the Georgia Department of Transportation and managed by the Atlanta Regional Commission. We offer incentives and services to employers, property managers, and commuters to motivate people to try an alternative to driving alone, like carpooling, van pooling, riding transit, and especially teleworking right now. Before I introduce today's moderator, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. For the sake of the presenters, we have muted all participants for the duration of the presentation. The webinar is recording and will be sent out in a follow-up email. Next, I'd like to call out the Q&A feature here on Zoom. If you have a question you'd like us to answer, please just drop them in there. And there's also a chat feature that we'll be moderating as well. GCO is really excited to have a solid group of presenters today who will be speaking on how organizations are having to reimagine work. We're hearing from a lot of different employers that they thought telework was going to be just a temporary solution. But with fall right around the corner, we don't really know how long this COVID will be impacting everyone's businesses. Our moderator for today is GCO's resident telework expert, Elham Shirazi, who's been working with multiple employers throughout the region on business continuity solutions during this COVID pandemic. Elham is a FlexWork consultant with over 30 years of experience in developing telework and flexible scheduling programs and is recognized as a leader in the field. She has developed resource materials, conducted training workshops, and evaluated the impacts of telework and flexible scheduling for hundreds of organizations around the country and for many here in the Metro Atlanta region. As I hand it off to you, Elham, we'll go ahead and pull up another polling question so you're able to learn a little bit more about today's attendees and what they're expecting in the future. So if we can go ahead and pull that second question up, please.
Thank you, Dan. So if we can take just a second to fill out this second poll. What are your plans for the future of teleworking and flexibility? And this question is really asked in the post-COVID environment. And I think, Ari, that's probably enough time if we want to show the results. Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad to see that only 7% expect everyone to report to the office. So that speaks, volumes. for having flexibility in the future. As you can see, the most popular response, 67%, with allowing part-time, some full-time, and then also modifying of hours. And these are the lessons that we're hoping that will stick, because this particular type of emergency has lasted for over 5 months now. And as we know, many organizations are already telling employees they won't be opening till December. Before I go into introducing our dignitary guests for today, I wanted to also share with you that I was not surprised to see that the biggest issue these days is childcare and homeschooling. And I think, of course, this is related to this time of the year, which is about school opening. And, some organizations are pushing people to get back to work, but, individual employees have issues in terms of how to deal with their children and homeschooling and whether or not they go to school or childcare. With that, I would like to introduce Ms. Ann Burris. And we had the good fortune of working with Ms. Burris very recently. She is the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Human Resources for the Georgia Department of Human Services. Prior to being in this capacity, Ms. Burris served as the Assistant VP and Chief Human Resources Officer for Kennesaw State University. She has over 16 years of human resource management and administrative services experience within public and private sectors. She serves as the Department of Human Services Ethics Officer, a member of the State Health Benefit Plan Advisory Council, and many others. She is also a U.S. military veteran, and she was recognized by the Georgia Secretary of State with an Outstanding Citizen Award. She's an active member of the Society for Human Resources Management, also known as SHRM, and she has a Master's of Science in Human Resource Management and a Master of Public Administration from Troy State University. I'm going to introduce our second speaker as well. And it's interesting that today we have a common thread of people who've been in the defense industry, because Ms. Burris, as we heard, was in the military, and John Vivadelli also was in the Navy. And and John was at the U.S. Nuclear Navy as an officer aboard the submarine USS Silversides, and he served many other functions within the Navy. However, today he is a recognized expert in the field of workforce engagement, workforce strategy, and real estate measurement. And I can tell you that he is the earliest adopter of hoteling that I have ever met. I've known John for over 20 years, and he has a platform that works much like Airbnb, but for office space. So his software makes it quite easy. He will be giving a vendor neutral presentation today because we've asked him to do that. Because of the nature of our business, the Georgia Commute Options is vendor neutral, but we thought that John would be, he is one of the most well-known experts in this field. And prior to opening his own company, Agile Quest, he held marketing and sales leadership positions at IBM. And he has a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Colorado, Boulder. And he's done postgraduate studies at U.S. Navy Nuclear Power Prototype and Advanced Nuclear Engineering Schools. So without further ado, I was going to ask Anne if you would be kind enough to tell us what you're doing some wonderful stuff at the Department of Human Services regarding teleworking, and if you could tell us a little bit.
Well, thank you for the invitation to participate on this discussion. I really appreciate it. And again, I won't hold it against John that he's prior Navy, since I'm prior Air Force. But I grew up in a naval town, Annapolis, Maryland. So I do have a great appreciation for it. I could, if I'm possible, just kind of jump right into the presentation and just give a little bit of a background about our agency. So if I could go to the next slide, please. As an introduction to the Georgia Department of Human Services, we are one of the largest agencies in state government. We have more than 9,000 employees, and we have a budget of around $1.8 billion. The department is segregated into 3 program divisions, and those are the Aging Services, Child Support Services, and the Family and Children Services, more intimately referred to as DFACS. Our mission is, and our goal is, to build stronger families for a stronger Georgia. Currently, we have approximately 3/4 of our workforce that is teleworking to some degree. And what I mean by some degree, they could be teleworking full-time, they could be going into an office environment 1 day or 2 days a week, quite a bit of a combination. If I can go to the next slide, please. When it comes to our approach to telework prior to COVID-19, the Department of Human Services did have a telework policy, but culturally, teleworking wasn't always embraced agency-wide. So there were units that offered the flexibility to staff, but we found that it came with many limitations, micromanagement or no management at all, and even no degree of measurement. Can we go to the next slide, please? When it came to our approach to telework now during COVID-19, as you all know, teleworking became a necessity in order to protect the health and safety of employees and our clients. So all those mistrusts around teleworking, those had to be put to the side. It was a huge task to bring logistically parts together to make it happen. But I have to say that we did it quite quickly and with a bit of synergy. Executive leadership coordinated daily with HR, IT, facilities and support services, communications, and our division directors on processes to distribute laptops, Chromebooks, VPN, hotspots, mobile devices, nearly agency-wide to staff in record time. The agency transitioned to a remote platform the week of March the 16th. Our IT office, I have to give kudos and thumbs up and push-ups to them. They are phenomenal. Although we did encounter some minimal technology challenges with like VPN access in our very rural areas, some MS Teams functionality, and then Zoom with its global security concerns in the beginning and then outages. But our IT office was remarkably fast on resolutions and training resources. So, you know, when external environmental factors are negatively impacted, such as employment and benefit loss for citizens, social services entities like DHS must work harder, especially for eligibility and issues of benefits like food stamps, Medicaid, and temporary assistance to needy families. So our business operations never stopped. DHS never closed. We seemingly shifted to a service delivery model via online resources, virtual meetings, and client appointments. And we actually also increased the usage of mobile apps like the ones that we have for child support services. We also put performance measures in place to monitor and report via an executive dashboard that was being used by the divisions and offices to track progress on short and long-term goals and milestones. Because, as I said before, when it came to teleworking, we really didn't have a process. It was either not tracked and some people were able to kind of float on, or there were a lot of micromanage of the program. So we developed and refined the process to make it easier to track progress when people are working remotely. Next slide, please. Telework training. Well, you know, again, we did always offer training and checklists as a part of the policy requirement for teleworking. However, we found that an update was needed, especially for managers on how to successfully manage those remote teams. So that's when we reached out to the Georgia Commute Smart Partners for some assistance with reviewing our current language and making recommendations on how we could change it to be better supportive of our environment that we were now operating within. So our training is delivered via a learning management system that includes checklists and agreements that are available both online and as fillable documents. Because we do know that some folks, when they have the outages out in the rural areas, can't get to the internet. We still want them to be able to access the resources. Next slide, please. Lessons learned and future plans. Well, first I'll kind of try to tackle the lessons learned. The biggest question was, are you prepared? And we kind of asked each other, what does that truly mean? And, you know, defining it, we said, well, that means to make ready beforehand for something and to put in a proper state of mind, or to prepare to listen, to work out the details of the plan as far in advance as we possibly can. Then to pull it all together and then to put it in writing. But as you know, with COVID-19, very few individuals had that opportunity to do that all in advance. And so we had to do that rather quickly like others. So what we found was communication upward is just as important as communication downward. Involving all parties associated with the moving parts is critical from beginning to end. We learned that our business continuity planning, which was a tool that we had already had in place, became even more of a critical strategy for us. And then we also learned that teleworking is not a bad word. Future plans for us, technology has changed our present and future. So keeping up with the way technology can augment and sharpen our operations is a key focus, as well as continuous process review and improvement. You know, this was a huge transition for everyone, whether it was in public or private sector. So using a collaborative team approach with executive leadership, HR, IT, facilities and support services, communications and training, you know, it really made the process faster, easier, and more comprehensive. What was once viewed as a vice, you know, is now an opportunity. Teleworking effectively and management of it, it's a recruiting and retention strategy. You know, however, there are still some challenges that we're facing, and those are things like employee burnout and feeling, you know, disconnected. Those are the areas that we're now trying to turn our attention more towards. So, you know, things in the last 5 months that we've created, especially within the HR realm, has been initially the HR helpline, and that was specifically designed to address questions or concerns, you know, regarding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, questions about teleworking and how it should be worked and how it should be managed. And then COVID-19, when a lot of our employees had questions in regards to, you know, colleagues, neighbors, children, other family members being impacted, how would that impact them in the workplace? We also created a SharePoint site where we could provide as frequently as possible as the information was changing with the U.S. Department of Labor, with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, providing COVID-19 updates. And then we created some HR mindful moments that we send out on a weekly basis, reminding people about different things that they can do to stay connected, to stay healthy, and to take breathers. We also started a series for benefit talks, which focuses on the different types of leave that are available to people, in their health, well-being, and retirement questions if they have any. We reached out also to our employee assistance program and had them provide us more information that we could highlight for mental and physical health of the employees and their family members. And then we started recently a DHS Connect monthly panel series of subject matter experts where we address things like the first series addressed safety in the workplace. The second one was crucial conversations because we were right in the heat of the moment when it came to diversity and inclusion issues, and then new norms of working during COVID-19. And then we are now about to do our planning for our annual awards program and to deliver it virtually again. First time ever having to do that. And then we have our commissioner, our agency head, who does biweekly addresses and, you know, kind of re-emphasizes that we're here to support, and anything that you need, please reach out. Don't hesitate to kind of contact us so we can address those issues with you. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we have been working on at the Georgia Department of Human Services.
Anne, thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. Obviously, you have such a comprehensive package for what is teleworking today, you know, within DHS. And I wanted to ask you a specific question, because this has come up with our conversations with some of the other, you know, local jurisdictions, especially cities and counties. And I know that you've given a lot of thought to this. And the question is, how are you dealing with staff's, you know, childcare and homeschooling issues? Because as you and I both know, prior to COVID, telework was not acceptable as dependent care. But I know you've given this issue some thought. So I would love for you to share that.
Yes, actually, you know, I think the first schools that opened in the state was around the August 3rd timeframe. So prior to that, we had kind of reached out to our partners at the U.S. Department of Labor to kind of figure out what are some additional things that we could do as it applied to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, giving employees an opportunity to take a breather if necessary. And so they helped us to kind of create a grid, and that grid we communicated in advance of the schools opening up to show you what your options would be. So if your school was opening virtually only, again, if you're unable to balance being able to work and the flexibility that you and your supervisor have created around the remote working situation, and that's just not working for you, this is a legal benefit that you're entitled to. And so we have not, I have to say, in our population of over 9,000, the majority of our staff has really figured out a way to work it out and work with it. And we've provided them as many resources as we possibly can. So we don't have, I wouldn't even say 5% of our population that has really said, you know, I'm finding it difficult to balance. And I can also appreciate the circumstances, because myself, you know, I have still have elementary and middle schoolers. And so my children are in an environment where they have to, their school is 100% virtual learning right now. So, you know, just ensuring that we provide whatever resources employees need and being as flexible as possible under the circumstances, because it's an impact not only for our employees, but for the customers that we serve as well.
Thank you so much for that response. I think, you know, please, members of the audience, know that you can ask questions at the end of everybody. So do enter those in the Q&A. And with that, we're going to have John Vividelli give us a presentation about Love Where You Work, or, you know, what are the options here. So I'm assuming that for a second, yeah, we're going to see another screen come up soon.
Hello, everyone. Let's get to the presentation. Ilham, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Let me go into slideshow mode here. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. That's great comments, Anne, and I'll try to weave some of that into my presentation. So my name is John Vividelli. I'm CEO of AgileQuest Corporation, and we've been building technology for this thing called hoteling, or you might call it the dynamic workplace or the agile workplace, for 26 years. Our mantra is to love where you work. I want to love where I work. I want my people to love where they work. And so it's just kind of natural that we build products and services to help our customers love where they work. So we translate that in the number one factor for most organizations is that flexibility in work is the number one factor for engagement and for satisfaction of employees. So that ability to provide flexibility is really what we're talking about. And I kind of look at telework and hoteling like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? You can have a peanut butter sandwich and you can have a jelly sandwich, but man, when you put those two things together, you've got a very complementary thing going, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. And now more than ever before, we have this situation with COVID-19 that you really do need a technology platform in place in order to help people feel safe upon their reentry into the office space. It is the number one issue right now for people coming back into the office is, do they feel safe in being able to come back? First of all, let's talk about some terms. There isn't one definition for a lot of these, so I went ahead and put something up, and I guess you guys will have access to these slides, so you'll be able to see it. But most organizations, I'd say 95% of the people in office space are in something called permanently assigned space. It's a one-to-one worker-to-workplace ratio. The next kind of a office sharing thing, a desk sharing experience would be a step up from permanently assigned space where you take two people and you say, okay, desk 101, Elham and John, you're going to share this space. So when John's not in the office, Elham's using the desk, and go figure it out, right? You and Elham just kind of work out the details of who's going to be in the office and who isn't. The third one would be something called free address, sometimes called hot desking. And that is, there's really no platform in place to manage it or to measure it. You just walk into the office, hunt around, hunt and peck until you find a place to go to work. Then you have hoteling, which pretty much by definition means that there's a system in place to allow you to choose what you want, secure it for your use, and then be able to measure the actual use of that asset, which is the last thing, which is absolutely critical. So for the business owners and managers in the audience, I know this is going to come as a shock. I know you're not going to believe this. Just please push the I believe button here for a second, because it's true. Businesses pay for this much space, yet you're only, pre-COVID, only actually use 30 to 40% of any office in the United States on average. That means 60 to 70% of all office space, that's 14 billion square feet of office space, was actually used only 30 to 40% of the time. Today, in New York City, it's about 8%. So 90% of the time in New York City, office space is vacant. There's nobody there. I'm going to give you a number. It's $15,000 per workspace per year to run a desk. $15,000 per workspace per year. So if you think about that, every day over 50 million people are working somewhere outside of the office. Could be home, could be Panera, could be co-working, could be wherever. So the question, why would I want to do hoteling? Well, there's about 50 million really good reasons to think about it. So what would a technology platform look like that might do a good job of this thing called hoteling? Well, it should allow you to measure how often your space is being used and not be intrusive to anybody. So transparently to anyone, you ought to be able to measure how often the space is actually being used. You should be able to manage those permanent seats and know that if somebody didn't come into the office, they could automatically, that desk could automatically be released and allow somebody else to use it if you wished to do so. You've got this thing called hoteling, got this thing called free address, meeting management. You might want to connect into smart buildings systems like control HVAC, power, and lights based on actual occupancy. This is the big one, and I'm going back to what Ann said. Disaster recovery and business continuity is a huge reason to do telework and hoteling. It's absolutely fundamental to the operations, the resilient operations for any business, because COVID-19 is not going to be the last time we're going to have a situation where we're going to have a disaster recovery situation. We had it in 9/11, we had it in hurricanes like Sandy, we've had it in Katrina. Office space disappears, it goes away, it doesn't become available. How can I operate so that my people can immediately find a place to go to work, whether it's at home or maybe another office? That's a huge thing, and it will continue to be big because there's going to be COVID-20 and whatever else. And then the next thing would be back to the workplace. So I'm going to cover this because this is the most important thing that people call us about right now, is back to the workplace. And of course, all of this needs to be measured, because if you don't have the data, you aren't managing anything without data. You're not managing your facilities, you're not managing your people, you're not managing anything unless you have the data to do so. So, employee trust. How can I show my people as a business manager that I care enough about you that I'm going to do something and invest in tools to make it safe for you to go to work? Having a platform to allow people to choose places to go to work that are far away from somebody, that aren't close to somebody, is a big deal. I don't want to come into the office and have to touch a bunch of stuff. So does this platform allow you to go and book space and find availability without touching stuff in the office other than your phone, which is something that is safe because you touch it all the time? Can I partition and stagger? Can I have a certain amount of my workforce go back on Mondays, some others go back on Tuesday, or maybe 1 week versus another? Can the platform help me do that? Can the platform disable spaces so that I can manage physical distancing? So a lot of people use social distancing. I kind of like to use physical distancing. It's a more accurate term, I think. Work from home. Why do you want to know if somebody's working from home versus working in the office? First of all, it's a safety thing. I want to know if you were home on a day when something bad happened in the office. Oh, Ann's at home, she was fine. Number two, it would really be nice to understand the engagement of the workforce wherever they work. So how effective, how engaged, how satisfied are people when they're working from home versus when they're in the office versus when they're in co-working versus when they're somewhere else. If you don't know where they're working, you don't have that data. To trace and to verify. So we have capabilities to be able to trace people. If somebody tested positive for COVID a couple of days ago, we can say who was in the office before that, who was in the office after that, what meetings was that person in, who might also have been affected. Lots of good stuff there. Another thing that's happening in lots of locations is that you're setting a maximum capacity in the office. So no more than 30% of the workforce can come in at any one time, or 40%. But it's important to be able to measure that, because if you're not measuring it, you don't know if you're in compliance. So compliance support is a big deal. The takeaway from this slide, there's going to be a lot of pictures here. The number one takeaway from this slide is you have to make it easy for people or they aren't going to play. They're not going to use the system. They're not going to use the workplace. You have to make it easy. You got to integrate into the things that they use every day. Teams, Exchange, full two-way. When you badge into the building, I sense that you are here and I can do something with that information. Lots of different digital signage options. I talked about the QR code thing where you don't have to have a digital sign at all. Lobby kiosks, blah, blah, blah. Lots of different stuff. So again, the big thing here is make it easy for people to be able to do what you want them to do, which is to give them the flexibility of where to go to work when they need to. Here's a couple of things a couple of success stories that you might say, hey, well, why should I do this thing called hoteling? Well, one reason might be that 41,000 people can be served by 18,000 desks, saving an organization $345 million a year in real estate cost reduction. This is the GSA in Washington, D.C. 4,500 people were spread across 4 buildings. They consolidated those buildings into 2,000 seats and saved $24 million a year annually, and were able to cut their energy consumption and that's MTCO, is metric tons of carbon equivalent, which is basically a sustainability metric or measurement. And then if your platform isn't used, it's not adopted, it's completely ineffective. It has to be adopted. And this is just an example of how rapidly you can deploy the platform. So you don't have to think too much. You can get it done. It's easy. You don't need a bunch of change management to figure this out. One last comment to kind of go back to the beginning. People think that people are teleworking more now than they did before, and I would agree that they are. Except, if the numbers are anywhere close to being right, that 60 to 70% of all office space was vacant, that meant that 60 to 70% of your workforce, your people, were working outside of your office. So there were a lot more teleworkers than anybody really thought of or knew about. And now we're just getting it to the point where now it's more acceptable, it's managed better, and management doesn't have the fear that, oh my gosh, somebody's working at home, they're unproductive, and they're taking care of the dog, and they're probably going for walks. So that has completely gone away. And people are becoming much more facile with the technology, so they're being much more productive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was great. It's Elham again. I do have a question for you before I start my own presentation, and that is, please, because I've always told a lot of the clients that adopting a software for the purposes of hoteling makes their lives easier. Can you please just share with the audience what are some benefits of using a software versus trying to do it by assigning it to one person in the office?
So, it kind of depends on the context, but one reason is if I assign you a desk and you're not there, it's costing me $40 every day to have a desk that's not being sat in. That's $15,000 a year. So from a management standpoint, there's an efficiency and a cost savings issue here, which is I've got all this office space and I have it assigned to everybody, but people aren't coming in. Does that make good sense to have an asset that isn't being used? My answer is no. So that's one answer. From a people point of view, look, I would like to have a system that I can see the busy times during the day. I don't want to come in during the busy time, so I'm going to come in the non-busy time. Do I have the data to be able to see that? Without a software platform, you don't have it. Where is Elham and Ann and Dan? Where are they sitting today? I might want to go work with them, not near them, but with them. And, Dan's on the 33rd floor and, my assigned desk is on the 2nd floor. Really? No, that's not a good idea. So if I had a platform, I could go and choose a place to go to work near where Dan is sitting so that I could collaborate with him. And then, so there's collaboration things, there's, or benefits, there's efficiency and cost savings benefits, lots of different ones. So I hope that answers the question for whoever asked.
It was me. It's Elham. Thank you so much, John. I think at this point, if it's okay, we're going to switch over to a different topic that we know has been has caused an issue in the workplace, and that is a lot of people are getting work from home burnout and also Zoom burnout. So if you don't mind, I'll spend about 10 minutes talking about how do we recognize this and how do we try to resolve it. So with that, let's go ahead and start. By the way, I said we did have a military theme running today between some of us on this platform, and I forgot to mention that Dan Murphy, our program manager, was also in the Marine Corps and in the military. So I think we've got all sides of defense here covered. Great. So let's go to the next slide. I wanted to first of all let you know that we're not imagining employee burnout. This is something that those of us who've been in this field did anticipate because of the very strange combination of things that went home as a result of COVID-19. With teleworking, it was a day that you could focus, nobody else was at home, so you had clear divisions between home and work. However, under COVID, this work from home option has, become a little bit more involved, where people's family lives and work lives and personal lives are kind of blending to each other. So there is there is this moment that we have to take a pause and, help with getting people to understand how they can, as much as possible, create separate spheres around these different, type of blocks that we are juggling in a one-day period. So, and one of the other things, by the way, a lot of studies have been done on this by Harvard Business Review and others, and I want to bring in a tip to your attention, and that is when we send an email late at night, and I have been guilty of that. A lot of times we underestimate how compelled people who receive it are willing to respond. So not only are we doing something a lot later, but we're getting some of our coworkers involved in this. So maybe we need to really think through when we are sending some of those emails. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What are some burnout red flags? I think these should be pretty obvious or common sense, but in case employees are feeling like they're avoiding work, in case their performance has been up but is starting to go down, or they're feeling apathetic or tired, or you see them constantly being plugged in and unable to disconnect. These are really big signs that, after 5 months almost of, sheltering in place and handling everything, that we might just be a little bit tired. And I don't attribute it just to burnout from work, but it's, I think, burnout from COVID. So let's move on. Well, what can we do, obviously, to help everybody cope in this situation? I think we do need to, maintain, obviously, physical and social boundaries in all arenas. So, when employees are working at home, they should try to, as much as possible, create a separate space when they're working. One of our top recommendations is please do have a workspace within your home, which is not the dining room table, in case you live with others. And after 5 months, people are starting to think, okay, maybe I should invest in that table, a surface space, not glass because it breaks, and a good chair at a minimum, and give some thought to how I set up that office. So, or just that workspace, so that others in the household know, okay, daddy or mommy are working, and it right away, gives them a signal. And to also, as much as possible, maintain a temporal boundary, so that we're not violating some time zones when we're working, and always focus on your most important work first in the day. So let's move on to the next one. Another tip is, and these are from Forbes. All the slides have, they have the citations. Set office hours. You can set office hours at home just the same way you do if you were a professor, and you basically, your door is closed or your door is open. And I know this is hard if you don't have enough space, or you don't have a significant other who can be helping with the housework and with childcare and all that while you're working, and then you can switch off. I think men in this environment are becoming much better partners, because because both men and women work, we see that men are more involved, and they have the time, or separate the time. Make sure that you're taking time off. Almost every employer that I've talked to is seeing that their employees are not taking time off because they want to save their vacation, and they're wondering, well, why would I use a vacation if I'm not going anywhere? But what we're finding is that just taking a staycation and turning all notifications off and unplugging really does a lot. There are beautiful areas in Atlanta or around Metro Atlanta. Take the time to go and discover those areas, and just ignore your computer. Of course, put a sign up on your message that says you're away. Let's go on to the next slide. A lot of people are just working and doing housework, and also for those of you who are by yourselves, do have a hobby, because you do need to balance work with some play. And, if, you're just getting sucked into working all the time, which is easy if you live alone, make sure that you have some good rituals in place and that you have time to dedicate to your other interests. If your job is at a point where you're feeling like it's going nowhere, have a discussion with your supervisor or mentor, to talk about what you do, talk about what things you like about your role and what you don't. The other thing is, if you're feeling any of these, sensations that, you feel alienated, depressed, or, or just, feel apathetic, I think you should talk to other people. Often our coworkers are experiencing the same thing, and it's good to bring some of these things out in the surface. And I know it takes a lot of bravery, but you'll be surprised how many people can relate to it. Let's go to the next one. Zoom fatigue, by the way, is real. If you're finding that you're more exhausted at the end of the day because of the number of Teams meetings, WebEx, Zoom, all these video conferencing meetings, know that this is, again, something that others are experiencing. And this is because we spend a lot of time on these virtual meetings and trying to compensate for the loss of face-to-face. Let's go to the next slide, please. So one of the reasons that Zoom fatigue is real is because, these kinds of video interactions force us to focus very intently on conversations. And it's a very different experience. And at the same time, it's easy to multitask. So sometimes people are attending these meetings and they're doing something else. So it kind of gets them, double tired. And it's also due to the fact that, we are processing information over a video, and it's different when you're looking at a person or they're, so to speak, face to face. And, we're also at times, it's very hard because you're trying to simultaneously process how people are reacting to you from the visual clues. Now, how do we get around some of this? Let's go to the next slide. So as you can see, this is like a battery, and, we're seeing it try to, charge and run out of charge. But before you start a meeting, try to get there a little early just to settle. And when you get to the meeting, try to take the time to acknowledge whoever else is in that, video or in that room, and reduce on-screen stimuli. So turn other things off so your attention is there. You can also disable, viewing yourself. So you can just select speaker view so you're not, looking at yourself, but you're looking at the person who's speaking. And yes, that goes along with blocking the self view. And I talked about resisting to multitask. And, I'm hoping that most of you have virtual social events and have employee engagements and talked about some of those occasions. And so let's go to the next slide now. Here's some more techniques. I want to remind everyone that not every interaction has to be a video interaction. I'm getting in the mode of, switching to phone calls with, people when it's just, one-on-one. We don't need a video call. And, don't default to video if you don't know someone well. It might be easier just to start with a conversation on the phone. Have an agenda, have an itinerary. You may want to switch up your setup, make sure that you have headphones when you're participating. And, remind yourself that this is a new place between presence and absence that we're learning to accommodate. And don't have necessarily high expectations of just being online for being a great way to communicate. Sometimes, those emails or phone calls are really what gives us more strength. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to give it back to Dan now, so we have enough Q&A time. And Dan, you can take it away.
Thanks, Ilham. As we wrap up the presentation today, I just want to highlight a few of the resources available for employers and where to find them. So we have the georgiaoptions.com, the website, where you'll be able to find the quick start guide that we put out not too long after employers started sending employees home. So it's a great resource for those looking for a quick solution still for business continuity. And then more recently, we put out a Finding Balance brochure, which it's just going to help employers really manage the long-term realities of the COVID pandemic. And you also be able to find our previous webinars and then our last upcoming webinar on Thursday. As far as GCO's telework services, so in addition to the services and resources available for employers, we offer a white glove service for telework policy implementation and guidance, and we can really be as flexible as our partners need to be. We can assist with IT, with pilot programming, and also those full implementations. As for where to find us, as I mentioned, there's the website. We also have the email here below, and also you can reach out to us at the phone number as well. All of our contact information is at our website. And last thing before I open up to the Q&A portion, as you exit today's Zoom webinar, you'll receive a notification to take our survey when you leave. So we'd really appreciate it if you could just complete that survey. It'll take less than 5 minutes, and it really helps us to know what you thought about the webinar and how to improve. And with that, let me pull up some more questions here. So the first question we have is from Livia. Any thoughts on the fact that people treat their workplace as a second home? With hoteling, they're not attached to any specific place. Just thinking about it from an engagement perspective. So Alham, do you want to start off with that? And then maybe we can have John give some insights as well.
Sure. I actually wanted to give some context to who Livia is.
Yeah.
John, Livia was a presenter for us at our last webinar. Livia is with WAPTech. And, obviously they're a logistics firm, but have, some functions that can be done from home. And I know that WAPTech recently opened 20% of their Atlanta office, but Livia has not been seeing a lot of people coming to attend. So, so with that, I'm introducing Livia to you, and I would love for you to answer her question.
Livia, nice to meet you. Thank you for the question. So I alluded to engagement, and so in survey after survey, flexibility in work and in workplace is the #1 driver for engagement and customer and employee sat. So much more than compensation, vacation, and other kinds of things. So, and maybe Ann can add to that from a standpoint with her HR background, but flexibility is really key. So people have a misconception about hoteling that it's like you're a person without a country. It's the exact opposite. You actually can choose the places where you want to go to work to engage with the people whom you want to engage. If you have an assigned seat on the 2nd floor and there are people that you want to engage with, we again talked about this on the 33rd floor, how engaged are you? So the idea is to give people the choices to go where they need to go in order to do the best work. So if I want to do heads down work, usually I'm not going to do that in the office. I'm going to do that at home, maybe, if my home is conducive to that. If I want to do collaborative work, I'll choose to do it in the office, and I'll choose to do it in a place that's close to the people I want to collaborate with. So hoteling actually aids this thing called flexibility, which drives engagement and also aids collaboration as well. So you actually feel closer to people when you have more choices about where to go to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, John, I wanted to add that, for people who really need that space, there's always the option of resident tenants of the hoteling arrangement, right? And you may want to talk to that a little.
Please explain a little bit better what
Oh,
you mean.
well, in a hoteling space, you may, set aside 10 desks for people who are going to report to work every day, right? It doesn't all have to be shared.
No. Oh my gosh, no. See,
Okay.
this is another thing. If you take a look at the survey, you ask the question, will everybody work from home all the time? No. Will everybody work from the office all the time? No. Okay. What does that mean? That means that they're going to be working sometimes in the office and sometimes at home. All I'm saying is, for gosh sakes, help people to do that and allow them, give them the tools that they need to choose where they want to go to work, when they want to go to work there. And if management has that data about how often people are working and how effective they are in each location, they can take money, they can divest of stuff that's not working, invest in stuff that is working, and that way drive even more productivity out of the organization.
Dan, I think there was a question about what if someone hates teleworking, and maybe we can have Anne answer that.
Okay. Well, we actually do have employees that, after the initial rush to get everybody working remotely for everyone's safety and well-being, that employees expressed, I actually want to come back to the workplace. And so what we did was ensure that the workplaces that they worked in were conducive to them coming back. So ensuring that, protocols were put in place for the 6 feet of social distancing, making sure all of the common areas were cleaned and disinfected, providing them with what we called PPE kits, personal protective equipment kits that included masks and gloves and hand sanitizers in the pack. So we welcomed those who wanted to come back to the workplace where, all of the executive orders were starting to lift restrictions and allow that to happen, because we knew that some people just do not like to work from home consistently. And I would have to say I'm one of those individuals.
Thanks, Ann. Someone put a comment here in terms, and we can kind of rephrase it as a question, but Elham or Ann, if you'd like to chime in here in terms of organizations knowing that there is a certain element of bringing people together when that's going to be appropriate to kind of build that rapport and fraternity. So is there anything in terms of ways that maybe you're doing that virtually now, and thoughts about when, as people are coming back into the office, keeping that balance between allowing people to maintain the freedom that they've come to appreciate from working to home, while also building that rapport and that sense of community at the workplace?
Anne, would you like to answer that first?
Okay. I know for us, we put together what we called Return to the Workplace work guidelines for managers and employees. And so again, we talked about all of those protective protocols being in place for them, because again, the fraternity is extremely strong when you've got a unit, especially smaller units that were accustomed to working together consistently for a couple of years. So when it came time we also looked at people's duties and responsibilities. Some individuals, because again, we kind of jumped right into everyone working remotely in the beginning, that all of their duties did not lend themselves to being done remotely, and that a certain percentage of their job really needed to be done in a workplace. And so we allowed them the flexibility that, hey, if you need to telework 3 days or 4 days from a remote location, but come into the office 1 day or 2 days a week to take care of those things that cannot be done remotely, please do so. So again, we just offered a tremendous amount of flexibility, but again, first and foremost, ensuring that the business is getting done. And so far, we've been fairly successful with it.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, please don't think that we're saying that the office should go away. Actually, I want to let you all know that on Thursday, we are going to have a presentation about the data, which is, again, Metro Atlanta centric, about what people are thinking about the return to the office. And this is the second wave of a survey that was done earlier. You know, a lot of organizations are coming in with maybe 3 days at the office, 2 days at home, or in, you know, hoteling. So it seems like a lot of people like the idea of flexibility, but it has to fit your organization and your needs. So I hope that answers your comment. I think it was Katie. So I think that's all the time we have today.
Yeah, doesn't look like we have any more questions, and we're at 2 p.m. So this is wrapped up perfectly. First of all, thanks to our panelists for volunteering their time and their insights. We really appreciate it. And also thanks for all of you who are attending. We know that Zoom fatigue is a thing. So hopefully you found the presentation helpful, and we wish you the best and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.